Order, order. We start with questions to the Secretary of State for Scotland, Mary Glindon.
Number 1, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. As you know, the Secretary of State has suffered a family bereavement this week, so will not be with us today. I'm sure the whole House will wish to send him and his family our deepest condolences. Can we also pause to think about those communities, including those in my own area in the Scottish borders, which have been devastated by the recent storms? I know that emergency services, council and power company workers are supporting them as best they can. Lastly, Mr Speaker, can I wish you a happy Burns Night, which will be celebrated around the world tomorrow.
Excellent.
In response to the Honourable Lady's question, the ongoing situation with the Post Office and Horizon is clearly a very serious issue. We need to ensure that all sub-postmasters wrongly prosecuted finally get justice, no matter where they reside in the UK. I can assure the Honourable Lady that my officials are working at pace with the Office of the Advocate General and other key UK government departments to consider the issues around wrongful convictions.
Mary Glindon.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In Scotland, these prosecutions were carried out by the Crown Office and the Procurator Fiscal. Ministers in Crown were made aware of concerns around potentially unsafe prosecutions in 2013. Can the Minister tell the House why it took so long for the prosecutions to be halted and previous convictions to be reviewed?
Mr Speaker, the Horizon scandal is one of the greatest miscarriages of justice in this country's history, with hundreds of people having their lives ruined and reputations dragged through the mud. The Prime Minister has announced new laws that will be brought forward to make sure that those wrongly convicted are exonerated and swiftly compensated here in England. Now, as the Honourable Lady will know, administration of justice is a devolved matter, but the UK Government is in contact with the Scottish Government to explore the most effective way to exonerate and compensate those innocent people.
Shadow Minister Michael.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And can I pass the thoughts of these benches to the Secretary of State at this difficult time and join him with his comments about all those affected by flooding as well. The scandal of the unjustified prosecution of sub-postmasters, the length and breadth of this country is almost beyond words. And although it shouldn't have taken a TV drama to get actions, it is good that those found guilty in England will now have their convictions quashed. But meanwhile, in Scotland, we're no clearer on how those wrongly convicted will get justice. The First Minister initially claimed he would be happy for this Parliament to legislate for every victim across the UK, but his Lord Advocate has then said that she doesn't support blanket exonerations. So, can I ask the Minister, what is he doing to ensure that those who were wrongly convicted in Scotland finally get the justice they deserve?
Mr Speaker, officials from the UK Government are working with their counterparts from the various devolved administrations, including the Scottish Government, to fully understand the legislative options that are available across the respective jurisdictions. I'd like to reassure the Honourable Member that it remains a priority for all concerned to ensure that those sub-postmasters receive justice and the compensation to which they are entitled as quickly as possible, irrespective of where they live in the United Kingdom.
Alexander Stafford.
Please, sir.
Minister.
Mr Speaker, oil and gas is and will remain a vital sector for the UK. The UK Government is committed to supporting this industry. That is why last week I attended the Grangemouth Future Industries Board with other UK and Scottish Government ministers on the transformation of the Grangemouth oil refinery. The introduction of the Offshore Petroleum Licensing Bill demonstrates our ongoing investment in this industry.
Alexander Stafford.
Thank you very much, sir. My right honourable friend knows that Scotland has the potential to be one of the world's most advanced producers of hydrogen, and oil and gas companies play an important role in this transition. What is his department doing to support oil and gas companies who employ a huge number of people in Scotland and in my own seat of Rother Valley in building their hydrogen production, transmission and use capabilities to ramp up the production of hydrogen so we can get more of this low-carbon energy we so need?
Grateful to my honourable friend for that question. We anticipate that by 2030 the UK's growing hydrogen sector could support more than 12,000 jobs and unlock £11 billion worth in private investment. Our hydrogen production delivery roadmap sets out proposals for annual hydrogen allocation rounds from the year 2025 to 2030, helping to provide certainty for the industry. In December, we announced the results of hydrogen allocation round 1, with Scotland fielding 2 successful projects.
Mr Speaker. It's the renewable sector in Scotland providing the greatest job growth in Scotland's energy sector, with the number of jobs in the renewable sector in Scotland growing by more than 50% in 2021. And the future of Scotland's job security, energy and economy lies with renewables. So when will the UK Government finally match support for the Scottish Government's £500 million Just Transition Fund?
Mr Speaker, well, I mean, the SNP's position on energy, and particularly in relation to oil and gas, is frankly all over the place. We don't know where the First Minister of Scotland stands on this. He described developing Rosebank as the wrong decision, but now seems to think that oil reserves can fund capital investment in an independent Scotland. We fully recognise the importance of the energy sector to Scotland. That includes oil and gas, it includes renewables. I will continue to work with all parts of the energy sector to develop that for the Scottish economy.
Mr Speaker.
Mr Speaker, the UK Government's funding for levelling up has now reached more than £2.9 billion. That's £2.9 billion, Mr Speaker, in Scotland. This includes almost £900 million of new funding announced last year. That's the equivalent of £535 per person in Scotland. The total is set to rise with millions of pounds of further investment in 2024.
Chris Law.
Mr Speaker, the Minister for Levelling Up will meet with me on Friday, but sadly this is not a courtesy that's been extended to the Leader of Dundee City Council, who's repeatedly invited the Minister to a round table in the city to discuss funding critical to projects such as the Eden Project and the Life Sciences Innovation District, amongst others. I've sought to continue the long-term investment regeneration of the city through these projects in the Tay City regional deal, so can the Minister assure me that he will urge his colleague to include in these our discussions on Friday, and his dreadful lack of engagement is from a UK Government that's committed to levelling up and not an outgoing Government winding down?
Mr Speaker, the UK Government is investing more than £60 million in projects in Dundee, and these projects have been identified as key priorities by Dundee City Council and other local partners. Now, he mentions the leader of Dundee City Council. After receiving £20 million for Dundee from UK Levelling Up funds, the SNP leader of Dundee Council recently said, "This is just the UK Government element. I'm pursuing the Scottish Government as well, because we need both governments to work with us if we're to make significant economic inroads into the challenges we face." So, Mr Speaker, I hope the honourable member will now agree with me and agree to write a joint letter with me to his SNP colleagues in Holyrood asking, where's the money? Where's the money?
Now we come to SNP spokesperson Tommy Shepherd.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. On behalf of myself and my colleagues, I'd ask the Minister to convey our condolences also to the Secretary of State. Mr Speaker, we were given assurances prior to Brexit that the structural funds which provided capital funding for Scotland would be replaced by the specific levelling up and shared prosperity funding after Brexit. Can the Minister say how that funding now from those sources compares with what it was prior to leaving the EU?
Mr Speaker, 4 years since the United Kingdom left the EU, the UK Government has announced more than £1.4 billion for new levelling up initiatives across Scotland. This exceeds the entire 7-year budget for the EU structural and investment funds for Scotland for 2014 to 2020, roughly £780 million of funding. So do not accept the analysis that the honourable member presents.
Tommy Shepherd.
Well, no, it doesn't actually, Mr Speaker, because this government has a tendency to draw all sources of capital funding into its levelling up myth. I'm talking about the specific levelling up fund and the shared prosperity fund, and they have given Scotland £471 and £212 million respectively, and that is exactly £98 million short of the £780 million that came from the EU structural funds. So when can we have the money, please?
Exactly.
Mr Speaker, the honourable member is simply not correct. £2.9 billion has been invested by this government into the communities, the length and breadth of Scotland. I know SNP members opposite have fought tooth and nail to stop that investment being delivered to those local communities, but this government, this Conservative government, will continue to invest directly into Scotland.
Corinne Smith.
Mr Speaker, question 4.
Minister.
Mr Speaker, funding policies for those studying in Scotland, including nursing students, is a matter for the Scottish Government. The UK Government supports collaboration between our nations to share best practice and provide better healthcare services. We will be open to future discussions with the Scottish Government about this.
For that answer. My constituent has been denied additional funding for her nursing degree because she's domiciled in England but studying in Scotland, whereas those studying in England, regardless of where they're domiciled, can access this funding. So what advice can the Minister give me to help my constituent?
Mr Speaker, nursing bursaries for those wishing to study in Scotland are a matter for the Scottish Government. Unfortunately, the Scottish Government only provides bursary support for Scottish domiciled nursing students, and only if they're enrolled in a course that leads to a diploma in Scotland. In contrast, the UK Government ensures that the Learning Support Fund is available to all UK students studying at English universities, regardless of where they are domiciled. I'd be very happy, on behalf of the Honourable Lady, to set up a meeting with my colleagues in the Department for Health to see how we might be able to pursue this further.
Chapman.
Number 5, Mr Speaker.
Mr Speaker, with your permission, I shall answer questions 5 and 12 together. Mr Speaker, the latest official figures speak for themselves. These show sustained increases in both the import and export of goods between Scotland and the EU, with healthy results for services too.
Mr Chapman.
Well, the Brexit pain continues, with £140 billion wiped off the UK economy, more regulation making it tough for exporters, and relatively to similar-sized countries, Scotland exports are under real pressure. Two themes in their First Minister's industrial strategy were to become an independent nation and to rejoin the EU. All the evidence points that that is the correct course of action, doesn't it?
No, it does not, Mr Speaker. Scotland continues to punch above its weight, both in exports and goods and services and foreign direct investment. Mr Speaker, trade is now well above pre-Brexit levels.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. According to the Government's own figures, new Brexit controls will cost the UK £330 million. Wow. Now, businesses in Glasgow are telling me that they're already suffering from increased costs and red tape when they're importing parts and exporting goods. Can the Minister explain to businesses in my constituency of Glasgow North West how Brexit is good for them?
Mr Speaker, the Honourable Lady and the SNP really do have a brass neck speaking about business costs when it comes to their own policy of bringing a hard border at Berwick next to my own constituency. That would risk thousands of jobs and force thousands of companies out of business. It would be the most damaging and reckless economic step. We will work through any short-term issues, but the answer is not the long-term decline as proposed by the SNP.
Curry McCarthy.
The former Right Honourable Member for Kingswood and Government Net Zero Star said that what business... Sorry, 6. Yeah, sorry.
Mr Speaker, supporting economic growth in Scotland remains a core priority for the Scotland Office. We are focused on long-term economic growth, generating more jobs and boosting business investment. This is exemplified by investment of up to £372 million in the Scottish Free Port and Investment Zones programme. This is on top of our £1.5 billion worth of investment into growth deals across the whole of Scotland.
As I was saying, the former Right Honourable Member for Kingswood and Government Net Zero Star said that what businesses and investors need from the Government is certainty, clarity, consistency and continuity. Never has this been more true than in Scotland, where there is huge potential for businesses and communities to flourish as a result of the green transition. But they're not getting the certainty, clarity, consistency and continuity that they need from this government, are they?
Mr Speaker, I don't accept that analysis. The UK has a world-leading ambition to deploy up to 50 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2030, for example, with up to 5 gigawatts coming from floating offshore wind. Offshore wind provides secure, domestically generated electricity and will play a key role in decarbonising the UK power system by 2035, achieving net zero by 2050. So I do not share the Honourable Lady's analysis of this government's focus in this area.
Ken Foster.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Does the Minister share my frustration that whilst his department's working to support the Scottish economy, the SNP is hitting it with higher taxes and not supporting vital sectors like hospitality and tourism in the way that's happening in England?
Mr Speaker, my honourable friend is absolutely right. Sadly, the SNP's sole focus seems to be independence, referendums and making Scotland the highest tax part of the United Kingdom. I can see this every day of the week in my own constituency as people are finding it increasingly difficult to justify remaining in Scotland when they're paying so much more tax compared to the rest of the UK by getting less good public services.
We now to Shadow Secretary of State Ian Murray.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I start by joining the Minister and passing on our condolences to the Secretary of State for the bereavement and his family. Can I also wish everyone a happy Burns Day for tomorrow and thank our wonderful Ayrshire musicians who are in the gallery who treated us to some entertainment last night. Mr Speaker, since this government has been in power, working people have paid on average 10 pence in the pound more in tax. The supposed party of low tax has created the highest tax burden on working people in 70 years, and it makes this the biggest tax-raising parliament since records began. In Scotland, the SNP has looked at this tax burden and said, hold my beer, as everyone earning more than £28,000 pays even more tax than they do in England. What impact does the Minister think this historically high tax burden has on the Scottish economy?
Mr Speaker, well, this government remains focused on reducing the tax burden when it is prudent to do so. But as he identifies, in Scotland we have an additional challenge in terms of the high tax agenda being put forward by the Scottish Government, the SNP, and I share his concerns about the impact that is having on the ability of the Scottish economy to perform at its full potential.
Ian Murray.
Mr Speaker, the Minister seems to think that picking your pocket of £10 and giving you £2 back is something to be grateful for. The fact is that working people all across the country and in Scotland are paying for the Tories crashing the economy. Mr Speaker, we know that the Barnett formula results in an additional £19 billion of public spending into Scotland's economy. But last week, the national newspaper reported that the SNP was being encouraged by their sister party in Wales to join the campaign to ditch the funding formula. 16 years of SNP government has left Scotland's public finances with a £1 billion black hole. We're in the middle of the worst cost of living crisis in generations, yet historically high taxes are already being imposed on working people to pay for this. Losing the Barnett formula would devastate Scotland's public finances and the economy like nothing we've seen before. Will the Minister join me in demanding that the SNP rule out this policy to bin the Barnett formula?
Mr Speaker, the biggest enemy of the Barnett formula and the biggest enemy of devolution in Scotland is the SNP. They want to rip up the devolution settlement and they want to stop the Barnett formula, which results in millions of pounds of extra investment going into Scotland each year. This government, this party remains absolutely committed to devolution and that Barnett formula and more investment into Scotland.
Gregory Campbell.
Number 7.
Mr Speaker, the United Kingdom Government has taken action to make trade between Scotland and Northern Ireland easier. The UK Government is also committed to providing funding to deliver targeted improvements to the A75 road. This will provide better links between Cairn Ryan ferry terminals serving Northern Ireland and South West Scotland, benefiting businesses on both sides of the North Channel.
Gregory Campbell.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I appreciate the reply the Minister has given us. He will understand, like many do, that the economic powerhouse of the United Kingdom is usually centred in the south-east of England and thus to the detriment of the south-west of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Will he do more to ensure that that small 12-mile stretch of water between Scotland and Northern Ireland is bridged in business terms by greater cooperation and expansion opportunities for people on either side of that 12-mile stretch?
Mr Speaker, the honourable member makes a very important point. I fully recognise the very strong links that exist between South West Scotland and Northern Ireland, and the potential to enhance those economic ties are great. Improved transport links are undoubtedly part of that with the A75 and ferry links. I look forward to working with him to see how we might be able to enhance and improve those links moving forward.
The Select Committee Speaker Shaw.
Speaker, Scottish businesses would give their right arm to have the arrangements that Northern Irish businesses have with their access to the single market and all the competitive advantages that brings. The Prime Minister has described Northern Ireland as one of the world's most exciting economic zones. Does he agree with that? And what's he doing to ensure that Scotland gets the same arrangements?
Mr Speaker, well, I thought the honourable member was going to stand up to tell me how great the House of Lords was now, a bit like his honourable friends, the member for Ross, Skye and Lochaber, in a sort of preemptive job application. Mr Speaker, Scotland is not Northern Ireland and does not share the land border with an EU country. It's disappointing the SNP seeking to play party politics with the situation in Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland, as the SNP well knows, has a unique place in the United Kingdom, and we will protect that.
Alan Smith.
Number 8, sir.
Mr Speaker, the UK Government works tirelessly to promote Scottish interests around the world through our extensive diplomatic network, forging business links and generating trade and investments. Our response to the Scottish Affairs Committee's recent inquiry in Scotland's international position highlights the extensive efforts we undertake to achieve this.
Alan Smith.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'm afraid I don't share the Minister's Panglossian view of this. Would you share my concern that recently published figures which show that in the years 2019 to 21, Scottish exports to the EU fell from 16.95 billion to 14.97 billion. Whatever the UK Government's doing, it's not working. So the Scottish Government has a pressing need to promote ourselves overseas for our economy and our society. Would the Minister not agree that now's the time to increase that overseas promotion, not cut it back on domestic wrangles?
Mr Speaker, given the member's interest in this area, perhaps he could speak with his SNP colleagues in the Scottish Parliament. They are cutting funding to South of Scotland Enterprise, which will mean less support for businesses in the south of Scotland to grow, innovate and export. Perhaps he could tell the First Minister of Scotland that promoting Scotland overseas begins with supporting businesses at home in Scotland.
Jamie Stone.
Number 9, Mr Speaker.
Mr Speaker, the UK Government recognises the important job that all NHS workers do, including those in the ambulance service. I see this every day of the week in my own constituency in the Scottish Borders. The UK Government would be open to exploring with the Scottish Government how we can work together and share best practice to reduce ambulance waiting times in all parts of the United Kingdom.
Jamie Stone.
Mr Speaker, last year in Scotland, almost 3,000 people had to wait more than 8 hours for an ambulance. But in recent days, women who might have to travel a 2.5-hour drive to Regmore Hospital in Inverness to give birth or for specialised treatment, they haven't been able to travel at all because the roads have been closed owing to the terrible weather we've had. Does the Minister share my deep anxiety for any woman who lives over 100 miles away from Regmore Hospital?
Mr Speaker, I share the honourable member's concerns and agree that these long distances are not acceptable, but it tells you all you need to know about the NHS in rural Scotland. NHS Highlands have said that it will need to substantially reduce spend following the SNP government's budget in December. The SNP government is taking a slash-and-burn approach to the rural NHS across Scotland.
Douglas Ross.
Number 10, sir.
Mr Speaker, the autumn statement supported families and set measures to grow the Scottish economy. With a stronger fiscal outlook, the Government has the space to cut taxes for hard-working people and businesses. This is highlighted by cuts to national insurance benefiting 2.4 million people in Scotland, and the extension of full expensing, ensuring the UK has one of the most competitive business tax regimes in the world.
Order, order. Please, don't walk in front of members like that. Douglas Ross.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Minister is correct that the autumn statement from this UK Conservative Government provided tax cuts for millions of Scots, provided support for businesses and invested to grow the economy. That was in stark contrast from the SNP's budget last month, which hiked taxes on hard-working Scots, failed to pass on the support to hospitality, retailing and tourism sectors, and has been widely criticised across Scotland. So does the Minister agree, as I do, with Sir Tom Hunter, who said at the weekend that the business community in Scotland doesn't believe the SNP has their back and that must change?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I agree with my honourable friend, and Sir Tom is right too. Traders in Scotland have accused the SNP government of undermining the rejuvenation of high streets across Scotland with their tax hikes of 6.7% through business rates. The SNP must stop attacking employers and high street traders who are already under tremendous financial strain because of the SNP's mismanagement of Scotland's economy.
Despite devolution rendering it pointless, the budget of the Scotland Office, along with that of the Attorney-General, has jumped by over £3 million since 2018-19, leaping up by £1.2 million just last year, while the Scottish Government's budget allocation suffered a real terms cut. Around 80 people currently work in Queen Elizabeth House alone for the Scotland Office, along with around 30 deluxe civil servants. What on earth are they doing, and how does he justify that to the Scottish taxpayer?
Mr. Speaker, the team at the Scotland Office, both in Dover House and in Queen Elizabeth House in Edinburgh, are doing a tremendous job supporting Scotland across the United Kingdom and around the world. I'd be very happy to welcome the Honourable Lady to join me to meet some of them so you can understand more clearly the important work that they do on our behalf across the UK.